I'm Reverend Melissa St. Clair, your Minister for Faith and Giving in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ and the Executive Director of the Center for Faith and Giving. I'm with you today to talk about budgets and profit and loss statements. I know I have your undivided attention now. Imagine you're mapping out how you're going to fund your next semester at school, right? So you think about tuition, housing, food, books, beverages, maybe a little fun money. You estimate what you think you'll spend. Well, these are your expenses. And you estimate what money you'll have coming in. This is your income. Now, some of your expenses will be fixed, like the cost of a credit hour. Others will have some flexibility, like the type of housing and meal plan you choose. Same with your income. You'll likely know what scholarships and grants are available, but you may be able to adjust the number of hours you work. In this process, you'll need to establish priorities. You'll discern what's essential versus what would just be nice to have. You'll need to get honest with yourself about what matters most to you. Okay, so that plan that you're putting together, that's a budget. Now imagine the semester is over. You look at your bank account, your debit and credit card statements, Venmo, Cash App, all of it. You see what actually happened, what you earned, what you spent, and whether you ended up ahead or behind. That's basically a profit and loss statement, sometimes just called a P&L. Now, churches and faith-based organizations do the same thing. The scale might be bigger, the language a little more formal, but the tools are more or less the same. So let's talk about what budgets and P&Ls are, how they're different, and how churches use both for accountability, transparency, and faithful decision-making. A budget is a plan for the future. It looks forward. In a church or faith-based nonprofit, a budget answers questions like, how much do we expect to receive in tithes and offerings, or in other sources of income like grants, interest income from investments, and building use fees? How are we supporting our denomination and the mission partners we have beyond the walls of our local church? A church might budget money for worship and music ministry, youth or campus ministry programs, outreach or mission partners, building maintenance and utilities, staff salaries and benefits. A church's budget reflects its values, whether we realize it or not. If a church says, we're all about serving our neighbors, but the budget doesn't allocate money for outreach or community partnerships, we might not actually care as much about serving our neighbors as we say we do. Now remember, there are other ways we give. It's not all about money, but money does matter, and it tells a story. Bottom line, in faith-based settings, a budget isn't just financial. It's theological. It's a statement of what a community says matters most to them based on who they believe God is and how they understand God's mission for them. Now, a profit and loss statement is a review. It looks backwards. It shows what actually happened during a specific period, whether that's a month, a quarter, or a year. In a church, a P&L might show actual giving received, actual costs for ministries and programs, unexpected expenses like building repairs, whether the church ended the year with a surplus or a deficit. So for example, a church may have budgeted $10,000 for youth ministry events, but the P&L shows they spent $12,000. Now that's not automatically bad, but it's important to notice and understand why. The P&L is a snapshot of what's actually been done. When there are discrepancies between the budget and the P&L, it's imperative that there's a narrative to explain the difference. Now in our example, it may just mean that more kids signed up for camp than anticipated, so more scholarships were given out. That's an amazing thing. It just requires generating additional income or coming in under budget on another expense. Either way, it provides some helpful data for planning next year's budget. Here's the thing. Budgets and P&Ls work best when they're used together. A budget says, this is what we plan to do. A profit and loss statement says, this is what we actually did. When church leaders compare the two, they can ask better questions. Did our spending reflect our mission? Where did we need to adapt during the year? Did generosity increase or decrease? And why might that be? Are there ministries that need more support or better structure? This is where accountability comes in. Accountability isn't about blame. Now, I have been in churches where one ministry team gets frustrated with another for going over budget, but honestly, as a pastor, I'd rather see a ministry team use every dollar allocated to them in service of the church's mission. And if it looks like they're going to go over budget, they simply communicate that with a rationale for why it's happening and then express willingness to work collaboratively on a plan to fund that overage. Money in the church is about mission. How we manage that money and any resource that's been entrusted to us is called stewardship. As Christians, we are called to be faithful stewards. Budgets and P&Ls help us with that. To create a culture of generosity in the church and in any organization, really, we need to cultivate trust, transparency, and truth-telling. Budgets and P&Ls help us with that too. Church councils, finance teams, boards use budgets and P&Ls to clearly report to the congregation how much money was received through offerings and gifts, whether spending aligned with the approved budget, how financial resources supported the church's ministry goals. Together, these reports create a transparent record of how money was handled. This transparency protects both the church as an institution and the individuals entrusted with financial responsibility. And it inspires trust because we are telling the truth about our finances. Budgets and P&Ls can also be used as a tool to help us evaluate ministry. Did a new outreach program require more funding than expected? Was a special event worth the cost? Are staff workloads and compensation just and sustainable? These are the sorts of questions we should be asking ourselves when reviewing these documents, because it's not just about the money. It's about the ministry. Plus, last year's P&L becomes the starting point for next year's budget. That's how churches learn and adapt how they allocate their resources rather than guessing year after year. Even if you never study business or work in finance, you're very likely involved in campus ministry, student leadership, nonprofit work, or your local church. So understanding budgets and P&Ls matters. This knowledge will help you serve responsibly on church or nonprofit boards, ask helpful questions in meetings, understand how mission and money are related, and lead with integrity and transparency. Our churches and faith-based institutions don't use money just to survive. They use it to live out their calling. So remember, budgets express intention, values, and hope. Profit and loss statements reveal reality and results. Accountability happens when the two are compared honestly. Together, these tools help transform generosity into meaningful, faithful action. Thanks for watching.